Nestled in the heart of the remote Appalachian Mountains, the village of Arden was a picturesque and tranquil haven. The villagers lived simple, harmonious lives, largely untouched by the outside world. Dense forests and towering peaks surrounded their quaint homes, creating a sense of both isolation and protection. The community was tightly knit, with generations of families living and working together, bound by shared traditions and a deep sense of trust. One fateful autumn night, the serenity of Arden was shattered. It began with a chilling, otherworldly howl that echoed through the mountains, sending shivers down the spines of the villagers. The animals in the barn stirred uneasily, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Moments later, the air was filled with the terrified screams of livestock and the panicked cries of villagers. The nightmare had begun. At dawn, the full extent of the horror was revealed. The village square, normally a bustling hub of activity, was eerily silent. Villagers gathered, whispering in hushed tones, their faces pale with fear. The sight that greeted them was grotesque. Several sheep lay slaughtered, their bodies savagely torn apart. Blood stained the grass and the cobblestones, a stark reminder of the violence that had erupted in the dead of night. But the most shocking revelation was the disappearance of Old Man Jenkins, a beloved farmer known for his kindness and generosity. His farmhouse, situated on the outskirts of the village, bore signs of a struggle. The door was broken off its hinges, and claw marks marred the wooden walls. His family, huddled together in grief and fear, could offer no explanation for his sudden and violent disappearance. Panic spread like wildfire. The villagers, though strong and resilient, were unprepared for such an assault. Whispers of wolves circulated quickly, but the elders, with their deep knowledge of local folklore, spoke of something far more sinister. They recounted tales of werewolves, creatures of legend that could transform from human to beast under the full moon. These stories, once dismissed as mere superstition, now seemed terrifyingly real. Father Marcus, the village's priest, played a crucial role in these dark times. With his tall, imposing figure and warm, reassuring presence, he was a pillar of strength for the community. He had served the village for decades, offering counsel and comfort through life's trials. As the villagers' fear grew, Father Marcus called for calm and unity. He organized nightly prayers and vigils at the village church, assuring the people that their faith would shield them from harm. Under his guidance, the villagers fortified their homes. Doors were bolted, windows were shuttered, and makeshift barricades were erected. Families huddled together, their fear palpable, as the howls continued to pierce the night. Each morning brought new tales of horror, livestock slaughtered, crops trampled, and occasionally another villager missing. The once peaceful village had become a place of dread, its inhabitants living in constant fear of the next attack. As the days turned into weeks, the attacks showed no signs of abating. The village, once vibrant and full of life, now had an air of desolation and despair. The villagers looked to Father Marcus for guidance, their trust in him unwavering. He remained a steadfast beacon of hope, tirelessly working to soothe their fears and fortify their spirits. Yet, as the full moon loomed closer, a sense of unease began to settle over the village. Father Marcus's reassurances, once a source of comfort, now felt insufficient against the relentless terror they faced. The villagers knew they needed to take action, but the question lingered. How could they fight an enemy that seemed more myth than reality? Little did they know, the true nature of their terror was far more insidious than they could ever imagine. The beloved priest, their source of solace, was hiding a dark and horrifying secret that would soon come to light, plunging the village into an even deeper nightmare. As the full moon approached, the villagers of Arden knew they could no longer remain passive. The nightly attacks had grown more brutal, and their desperation was palpable. The sense of urgency was undeniable. Something had to be done to stop the relentless terror that plagued their once peaceful village. In a meeting held in the village square, the townsfolk gathered, their faces etched with fear and determination. Father Marcus stood at the center, his presence commanding and calm. "We cannot live in fear," he proclaimed, his voice strong and steady. "We must protect our families, our homes, and our way of life. Together, we can fight back against this evil." The villagers nodded in agreement, their trust in Father Marcus unshaken. He had always been their guiding light, and now, in their darkest hour, they relied on him more than ever. Under his leadership, they formed hunting parties, each group composed of men and women armed with whatever weapons they could find, torches, pitchforks, and the few rifles available in the village. The forest surrounding Arden was dense and foreboding, with thick underbrush and towering trees that cast long shadows even during the day. It was within this labyrinth of nature that the werewolves hid, their movements swift and silent. The villagers, led by Father Marcus, ventured into the woods with trepidation, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. Father Marcus seemed to possess an uncanny knowledge of the forest paths and the werewolves' habits. He led the hunting parties with confidence, always seeming to know where to look. The villagers marveled at his skill and bravery, grateful for his leadership. Night after night, they scoured the forest, searching for any sign of the creatures that had brought such terror to their lives. Despite their efforts, the werewolves remained elusive. The hunting parties found traces of their presence, claw marks on trees, trampled undergrowth, and the occasional bloodstain, but the creatures themselves remained hidden. The villagers grew frustrated and weary, their morale waning with each unsuccessful hunt. It was during one of these tense nights that Agnes, an elderly woman known for her wisdom and insight, approached Father Marcus with a troubling suspicion. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, bore into his as she spoke. "There is something unnatural about these attacks," she whispered. "The werewolves seem to know our every move, our every plan. It is as if they are being guided." Father Marcus dismissed her concerns, his expression calm and reassuring. "They are cunning creatures, Agnes," he said. "They rely on their instincts to survive. We must remain vigilant and continue our efforts." Agnes nodded, but a seed of doubt had been planted in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the werewolves' cunning than mere animal instinct. She began to observe Father Marcus more closely, noting his movements and behaviors, looking for any sign that might confirm her suspicions. Meanwhile, the attacks continued unabated. Each night, the villagers fortified their homes and prayed for safety, but the howls of the werewolves echoed through the mountains, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond their doors. The fear and tension in the village were palpable, and the strain began to take its toll. One night, as the full moon cast an eerie glow over the village, a young teenager named Thomas decided to take matters into his own hands. Thomas was known for his sharp eyes and resourcefulness, traits that had earned him respect despite his youth. Driven by a desire to protect his family and uncover the truth, he ventured into the forest alone, determined to find answers. Thomas moved silently through the underbrush, his senses heightened by adrenaline. He followed a narrow path that seemed to lead deeper into the heart of the forest, where the trees grew thicker and the air colder. Hours passed, and just as he began to lose hope, he stumbled upon a hidden cave, partially obscured by vines and foliage. Inside the cave, Thomas found a chilling sight, a collection of items that unmistakably belonged to Father Marcus. There was a tattered cloak, a silver cross, and a blood-stained book of prayers. The implications were horrifying. As he pieced together the evidence, the realization dawned on him. Father Marcus was the leader of the Werewolf pack. Heart-pounding, Thomas hurried back to the village with his discovery. He knew that convincing the others would be a daunting task, given their deep trust in Father Marcus. But he also knew that the truth had to come to light if they were to have any chance of defeating the werewolves. When Thomas revealed what he had found, the villagers were initially reluctant to believe him. The idea that their beloved priest could be behind the terror that had gripped their village was unthinkable. But as Thomas laid out the evidence, their skepticism turned to horror. The reality that Father Marcus, the very person they had looked to for guidance and protection, was the mastermind behind their suffering was almost too much to bear. The villagers confronted Father Marcus, demanding an explanation. Cornered and exposed, his calm facade crumbled. With a snarl, he transformed before their eyes, his human form dissolving into that of a powerful and terrifying werewolf. The village erupted into chaos as the other werewolves, drawn by their leader's transformation, attacked in a coordinated assault. The once peaceful village of Arden had become a battlefield, and the true nature of their terror was finally revealed. The villagers, betrayed and terrified, had to muster all their courage to face the monstrous reality of their beloved priest's betrayal. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the village of Arden, its light filtering through the trees and casting long, sinister shadows. The villagers, already on edge from the relentless werewolf attacks, were now grappling with the unthinkable truth that Father Marcus, their beloved priest, was the leader of the pack. The sense of betrayal was profound, shaking the very foundation of their trust and faith. Young Thomas, having discovered the horrifying evidence in the hidden cave, found himself at the center of this revelation. He had barely escaped the forest with his life, and now he stood before the villagers, his voice trembling as he recounted what he had seen. The tattered cloak, the silver cross, and the blood-stained book of prayers, all unmistakably belonging to Father Marcus, painted a chilling picture. The initial disbelief was palpable. Father Marcus had been a fixture in their lives for as long as most could remember. He had baptized their children, married their young couples, and buried their dead. The idea that he could be the monster terrorizing them seemed impossible. But the evidence Thomas presented was undeniable, and the fear in his eyes spoke volumes. As the villagers grappled with this shocking revelation, Father Marcus himself appeared, his demeanor calm and composed despite the growing unrest. He tried to reassure the villagers, dismissing Thomas's claims as the wild imaginings of a frightened boy. "These are trying times," he said, his voice steady. "We must not let fear cloud our judgment. We need to stand united against this evil. But Agnes, the elderly woman who had first voiced her suspicions, stepped forward. Her sharp eyes fixed on Father Marcus, she spoke with quiet determination. "Thomas speaks the truth," she declared. "I have seen the signs, felt the darkness. We cannot ignore what is right before us." The tension in the village square was palpable. The villagers, torn between their loyalty to Father Marcus and the mounting evidence against him, looked to each other for guidance. It was then that another villager, Jacob, who had lost his wife to a recent attack, stepped forward, clutching a piece of torn cloth he had found near the site of her death. It matched the cloak found in the cave. With this new piece of evidence, the tide began to turn. The villagers' fear turned to anger, and they demanded answers. Cornered and with no way out, Father Marcus's calm facade began to crack. His eyes, once filled with benevolence, now flashed with a sinister light. With a guttural snarl, he began to transform. The villagers watched in horror as Father Marcus's body contorted and shifted. His limbs elongated, his hands sprouted claws, and his face twisted into a grotesque snout. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light as fur sprouted from his skin. The transformation was complete within moments, and where Father Marcus had stood, there now towered a massive, terrifying werewolf. A moment of stunned silence followed, broken only by the low growl emanating from the transformed priest. The villagers, frozen in fear, were jolted into action by Agnes's cry. "Defend yourselves! Use the silver!" she shouted, brandishing a makeshift silver weapon she had crafted from old heirlooms. The village erupted into chaos as the other werewolves, sensing their leader's transformation, launched a coordinated attack. The night was filled with the sounds of snarls, screams, and the clash of weapons. The villagers, though terrified, fought with a desperate fury. They wielded their makeshift silver weapons, striking out at the werewolves with everything they had. Thomas, driven by a need to protect his family and his home, found himself face to face with Father Marcus. The werewolf's eyes glowed with malevolence as he lunged at the boy. Thomas narrowly avoided the lethal claws, his heart pounding in his chest. He remembered the silver dagger Agnes had given him, and with a surge of determination, he stood his ground. Father Marcus, now a powerful and terrifying werewolf, loomed over Thomas. The young boy could feel the heat of the creature's breath and the weight of its malevolent gaze. But Thomas's fear was tempered by a fierce resolve. He knew that the fate of the village rested on his shoulders. As Father Marcus lunged again, Thomas moved with unexpected agility, sidestepping the attack and plunging the silver dagger into the werewolf's chest. The creature let out a blood-curdling howl, the sound reverberating through the night. The werewolf staggered, its eyes filled with a mixture of rage and pain, before collapsing to the ground, convulsing, and then falling still. The death of Father Marcus sent shockwaves through the werewolf pack. The remaining creatures, sensing the loss of their leader, faltered in their attack. The villagers, emboldened by Thomas's bravery, pressed their advantage. They fought with renewed vigor, driving the werewolves back into the forest. By the time the first light of dawn began to break, the village was in ruins. The ground was littered with the bodies of both villagers and werewolves. Those who survived were bloodied and battered, but alive. The werewolves had retreated, their numbers decimated, and their morale shattered. The villagers gathered around Thomas, their faces a mixture of relief and grief. They had lost much, but they had survived. Agnes, her eyes filled with pride and sorrow, placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "You have saved us," she said quietly, "but the cost has been great." The village of Arden had been forever changed by the events of that night. The trust they had once placed in Father Marcus was shattered, replaced by a cautious wariness. They had learned the hard way that evil could hide behind the most familiar and trusted faces. And as they began the long process of rebuilding, they knew that the memory of the werewolf pack and their beloved priest's betrayal would haunt them for years to come. The village of Arden lay in ruins, the aftermath of the horrific battle against the werewolves evident in every shattered window and blood-stained cobblestone. The villagers, though victorious, were deeply scarred both physically and emotionally. The death of Father Marcus, their once beloved priest turned monstrous leader, had left a void in their hearts and a haunting fear that permeated their every thought. The morning after the battle, the villagers gathered in the village square, their faces marked by exhaustion and grief. They knew that the werewolf threat was far from over. Despite their victory, the remaining werewolves still lurked in the surrounding forest, a constant and looming danger. The village elders, including Agnes, convened an emergency meeting to discuss their next steps. Agnes, though weary, spoke with a quiet authority. "We must not let our guard down. The werewolves have lost their leader, but they are still out there, and they will be back. We need to prepare ourselves for their return and finish this fight once and for all." The villagers nodded in agreement, their resolve hardened by the night's events. They began to fortify their homes in the village square, using the knowledge they had gained from their previous battles. Silver, the werewolves' only known weakness, was gathered from every corner of the village. Old heirlooms, jewelry, and even family treasures were melted down to create weapons and protective charms. Thomas, now seen as a hero among the villagers, took an active role in the preparations. He worked tirelessly alongside the others, his youthful energy and determination inspiring those around him. Agnes took him under her wing, teaching him more about the lore and history of the werewolves, hoping to arm him with knowledge as well as weapons. As the sun set on the second night, the villagers braced themselves for another attack. The full moon, now waning, still cast an eerie glow over the village, creating long, sinister shadows. The air was thick with tension, every creak and rustle setting nerves on edge. The villagers stood ready, their silver weapons gleaming in the moonlight, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Hours passed in tense silence, the village bathed in the cold light of the moon. Then, just as the villagers began to believe they might have a reprieve, the howls began again. The sound was bone-chilling, echoing through the forest and sending shivers down the spines of everyone in Arden. The werewolves were coming. The attack was swift and brutal. The werewolves, now leaderless but still ferocious, descended upon the village with a feral intensity. The villagers fought back with everything they had, their silver weapons striking true. The battle was chaotic, the air filled with the snarls of the werewolves and the shouts of the villagers. Thomas found himself face to face with one of the largest werewolves. The creature's eyes glowed with malevolence as it lunged at him. Thomas dodged, using the agility he had developed in his training with Agnes. He struck out with his silver dagger, the blade slicing through the werewolf's thick fur and into its flesh. The creature howled in pain, but continued its assault, its claws raking through the air just inches from Thomas's face. Meanwhile, Agnes led a group of villagers in a coordinated defense, using her knowledge of the werewolves' tactics to outmaneuver them. She directed the villagers to form a tight circle, their silver weapons creating a barrier that the werewolves found difficult to breach. Her wisdom and experience proved invaluable, giving the villagers a fighting chance against their supernatural foes. The battle raged on, the village square becoming a battlefield soaked in blood and illuminated by the flickering light of torches. The villagers, though outnumbered, fought with a desperate fury born of the need to protect their homes and loved ones. Every werewolf that fell gave them a glimmer of hope, but the cost was high. As the first light of dawn began to break, the tide of the battle turned. The remaining werewolves, sensing the coming daylight and the loss of many of their kin, began to retreat. The villagers, battered and bloodied, watched as the creatures fled back into the forest, their howls fading into the distance. The village of Arden had survived another night, but the price had been steep. The villagers gathered in the village square once more, their faces a mixture of relief and grief. They had lost friends and family, their homes were in shambles, and their hearts were heavy with the weight of their ordeal. But they had also gained a newfound strength and unity, forged in the fires of battle and tempered by the knowledge that they had faced their darkest fears and emerged victorious. Agnes, her old eyes filled with both pride and sorrow, addressed the villagers. "We have endured much, and we have lost many, but we have also proven that we are strong, that we can stand together against any threat. We will rebuild, we will heal, and we will remember those we have lost, and we will ensure that the werewolves never threaten our village again." Thomas stood beside her, his youthful face marked by determination and resolve. He had grown beyond his years in the space of a few nights, his bravery and quick thinking having saved the village. The villagers looked to him with respect and admiration, knowing that his actions had been pivotal in their survival. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm light over the villagers began the long process of rebuilding. They repaired their homes, tended to the wounded, and buried their dead with solemn reverence. The memory of Father Marcus's betrayal and the terror of the werewolves would linger, but so too would the strength and unity they had discovered within themselves. The village of Arden had been forever changed by the events of those nights. They had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, scarred but stronger for it. The werewolf pack had been driven back, their leader defeated, but the villagers knew that they must remain vigilant. The memory of the werewolves and the betrayal of their beloved priest would serve as a constant reminder that evil could lurk in the most unexpected places. As the villagers worked together to restore their home, a sense of hope began to bloom amidst the ruins. They had faced their worst fears and survived, and now they would rebuild, stronger and more united than ever before. The legacy of their struggle would live on, a testament to the resilience and courage of the people of Arden.